Erev Tov, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back to our second part series. So if last time we did the prologue of this Purim story, next week you're going to get the actual Purim story. So make sure you come to the Bet Knesset. That's a pitch. We're going to have Purim over here Thursday, Friday. The theme of our Bet Knesset is Purim. That's always the theme that we have. So please come join us over here. Yochanan, I'm looking at you especially. It's not so far, and it's a nice weekend to get away. So put it on the calendar. And I know your mom's in the background, so I'm inviting her too. On that note, we did the pre-story. We talked all about Belshazzar last time and the poor imitation that Achashverosh tried to do and got himself into the same hot water. Today I want to talk to you about the epilogue. What happens afterwards? You know, in Hollywood, the movie is, and they live happily ever after. Much of Megillat Esther almost feels that way. But is it really accurate? So I want to take you to, let's first talk about in 1967. In 1967, there were two professors, two researchers, Seligman and Meyer. You can guess what they were. They were both Jewish. And they were researching the response of first animals and then human beings, depending on the situation that they're put in. So they were experimenting on dogs, and they had three different groups. One of them was given mild to moderate shocks, but had the ability to control it by either jumping over something or doing an action that would stop the shock. The second group had no control. The shocks were administered, whether they jumped, whether they didn't, there was no way out. And then the third was a control group. After a couple of rounds of experimentation, they noticed something very interesting. The second group, the dogs, that whether they jumped, whether they tried to do something, they still got shocked. Once they had the opportunity to escape or to do something, they didn't. They didn't, because in a very short time, they developed what we know today as learned helplessness. You may be familiar with a similar story where they tell you about the elephants, how they're able to, at a very young age, I'm not telling you this is ethical, right? At a very young age, they'll tie them to a rope, and the elephant tugs, realizes it can't move. And eventually you see the elephant grows to be so big, and it's attached by a little string, but it doesn't move anywhere. Why? It's the same concept. Because in the mind of the animal, they realize, doesn't matter how much I try and what I do, I'm stuck. And once you can get a person into the mentality of, I'm stuck, even when they're not stuck anymore, they feel stuck. Some of the greatest prisons that people live are in their minds. They're free to go. It could be 20, 30, 40 years after the trauma passed. They're still stuck. I want to talk to you about national learned helplessness. What does it look like for the Jew when given the opportunity to leave exile, doesn't go? What's wrong with us? And maybe, how do we fix it? So to understand this, I want to take you through a couple of different eras, with the middle being Purim, and then the main focus, what happens afterwards. If you can, pull up the chronology. It should be in a PDF. Yeah, it was sent out together with the links. It says the chronology for books of Ezra and Nehemiah. So, where can you find it? Thank you. It's attached to the invitation in the Google Classroom. Now, Ezra and Nehemiah are contemporaries of Mordechai. They're going to be the central figures that we're going to talk about tonight. I want you to just look at the chart for a second so we can understand. Let's map out what we're looking at. If you look at the right column, it starts with Belshazzar. Remember, our main character from last time. It then goes to Cyrus the Great, or Koresh, Darius the Great, Daryavesh. We then have Achashverosh, and then we have, his name changes a little bit, Artashasta, sometimes without the sound, sometimes Daryavesh. Some historians say it's just like the title Paro, so it's just named king in another language. But that's the chronology of the kings. If you look all the way to the left, you have Belshazzar is killed. Koresh and Daryavesh take over. And that is when we have the first group of Jewish people going back from the exile of Babel to Yerushalayim, spearheaded by the leader Zerubbabel, also known as Shesh Batzar. So he goes back with the first group of Jews, along with Yehoshua the Kohen, and they start building the Beit HaMikdash. Jump down a little bit, and we're going to talk about all the middle. You then see, after Koresh, Dariavesh, we have the story of Purim, Mordechai, and Esther. And then we have Ezra and Nehemiah. And that's where I want to take you today. So if you take out your Tanakh, open up to the first chapter of Ezra. Now really, Ezra and Nehemiah were one book. In fact, sometimes you'll find that historically it's referred to as Ezra 1 and Ezra 2. Later on in history, it does get split up. We will later touch on why is it not called after Nehemiah. I want to walk you through the first Aliyah, the first pilgrimage of Jews going back up to the land of Israel 70 years after the exile of Babel ends, like which Navi had prophesied? Daniel did, but who was the Navi we quoted last time? Take a lucky guess. Very good, Yirmiyahu, right? Last time we talked about Yirmiyahu and Navi giving the prophecy of they're going to be in Babel 70 years. Belshazzar clearly not reading, not the Tanakh, or flunking his math class. And under Koresh, we have the first pilgrimage of Jews going up to the land of Israel. I want to read with you. Look at chapter 1, verse 1. Uvishnat achat leKoresh melech Paras. So in the first year that Koresh takes over. Dvar Adonai mipi Yirmiyah, he'ir et Adonai et ruach Koresh melech Paras, ve'yaver kol bekol malchuto v'gam b'mechtav lemor. Koresh takes over. It is now switching from Babel to Paras and Madai. And one of the first things he does is he goes back to honoring the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you know anything about Koresh, his style of leadership was very different than Nebuchadnezzar and any of the Babylonian kings. Whereas in Babel, there was one centralized government. All foreigners were made to be strictly under the thumb and the ethnicity and culture of the Babylonians. Koresh had a completely different model. These words, where Koresh is inspired by the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one of the first things he does is he starts returning the exiles, not just Jewish, but the different nations that Babel had taken. Right? It's not for no reason. We talk about Migdal Babel and the 70 languages being destroyed. Koresh says, it's my mission in life to restore the world back to order, to give people back their dignity. So much so that he writes much of the text that we have here in Ezra on a little cuneiform that looks almost like a football. If you ever go to London, there's a museum over there, and they have it. I think it's Exhibit 52, if I'm not mistaken. Though they keep on giving different museums the rights, but it's a beautiful piece that they found where all of Koresh's thoughts and explorations of how nations should be and what human rights should look like are actually written on this little piece in his own cuneiform style. If you know anything about American history, so Jefferson, right, was one of the founding fathers. They say he used to keep a copy of a book written in Greece on the human rights of Koresh, meaning one of the guiding principles of what does it look like for people to have rights? What does it look like to have a nation of diverse people who, yes, there's a certain amount of unity, but aren't pushed into conformity? They attribute that to Koresh. So Koresh over here says, I have the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's telling me, send the Jewish people back home. It's only fear to fulfill the prophecy of Yirmiyahu and Navi that the Jewish people are going to go home once the empire is destroyed. Let's look at Pasuk Bet. Ko amar Koresh melech Paras, Kol mamlechot haaretz natan li Adonai Elohei HaShamayim. Hashem has appointed me as the leader of all the nations, at least at this point in history, of much of the civilized world. My mission then is to restore the glory to the Jewish people, to bring God's name back into the world. How am I going to do it? Contrary to what religious Jews in 2025 think, it's by building the temple on Har HaBayit. That is an integral part of our nation, not just our religion, but our nationality. And he puts out a proclamation. He says, Mi bachem, mikol amo, Ye Elohav imo. who from the nation over here, from the Jewish people, who has the Spirit of God? Now, if you'll remember, we recently read 2 weeks ago, Parshat Teruma. The word, what word was used for those who have the Spirit to contribute? What was the word used? Remember, Kol? Kol asher nidvat libo. Whoever's heart has the Spirit. Because not always is it a logical thing. But who has the Spirit within them to say, I want to be part of this mission? ויעל לירושלים אשר ביהודה, ויבן את בית אדוני אלוהי ישראל, הוא האלוהים אשר בירושלים. Who has the Spirit in them to go back home, to go build, to go pioneer. וכל הנשאר מכל המקומות אשר הוא גר שם, and those Jews who don't want to go, you're comfortable, you already invested all your real estate, you really like the school your kids are in, you love the country club, Okay, so ינשאו אנשי מקומו בכסף ובזהב וברכוש ובבהמה, you're going to be the supporters. If you don't want to be the people who go with your feet and use your hands to build, at the very least, you're going to give your money. ובהמה הנדבה לבית האלוהים אשר בירושלים. If you look at פסוק ה', ויקומו ראשי האבות ליהודה ובנימין, והכהנים והלוויים לכל העיר האלוהים את רוחו, לעלות לבנות את בית אדוני, אשר בירושלים. And it was the people who the Spirit in them burned, the chalutzim, the pioneers who felt, I want to go back home. It doesn't matter how good it is in exile. It doesn't matter how much we've made it. I want to go home. I want to go back home. וכל סביבותיהם חיזקו בידיהם בכלי כסף, בזהב, ברכוש ובבהמה. And the others donated. They gave them the financial backing so they could go back home. והמלך כורש הוציא את כלי בית אדוני. And Koresh says, I need to give you back what belongs to you. And he took much of the vessels that were stolen by Nebuchadnezzar, later used by Belshazzar, and he returns it. Not everything, but much of what they were able to send back home, he sends. And if you look at Pasuk Chet, the 8th verse, ויוצאם כורש מלך פרס על יד מטרדת הגזבר, ויספרם לשש בצר הנשיא ליהודה. And he sends it with shesh batzar, code name for Zerubbabel. The name may be familiar for those of you on Chanukah who sing Ma'osu. Remember the verse? Ketz Bavel, Zerubbabel, leketz shivim noshan. Right? After 70 years, Koresh says, Chevra, it's time for you to go home. Whoever feels this burning spirit that wants to go, go. Not only am I sending you, but I'm making sure that those who aren't going will give you the financial backing you need to pioneer this effort. And I will put Zerubbabel, who is from the family of David, together with Yehoshua Kohen Gadol. They're going to lead the first mission up to Israel. You have to understand that coming back to Israel, for 70 years, the land is completely uninhabited. Meaning, sure, are there people there? Yes. But is there any formal structure? Absolutely not. Yeah, there are tribes and there are different warring nations that were left over, but there was no infrastructure set up. And they come to mamash, what we call, correct, a cholva, a really destroyed site. They have a lot of work ahead of them. So, again? Very, nachon. Some of the commentators say the reason he got that name is because he was one of the children who was indoctrinated into, like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he was indoctrinated into the Babylonian society, into the high class, because they knew that he was from aristocracy. So they had groomed him to be a leader. And over here, Koresh says, you're the perfect leader. You're from Bet David. Go home. The problem is, and this is history as we know it, up until the Jews came, nobody took the time to establish anything in the land of Israel. In the 70 years that the Jews were gone, not one people that were there did anything to make it better, to make it nicer. In fact, if you know anything about physics, there's a law of entropy. Tell me what the law of entropy is. Very good, Henny, not you. Yeah? We're the opposite. The law of entropy is very simple. Things left alone, as time progresses, only get worse. So for example, if you leave your car outside for 20 years, it's not over time going to grow and become a Lamborghini and then a limousine. It's in 20 years going to become junk. Okay? It's going to go to the junkyard. That's what it becomes. You leave a house for 20 minutes, When I come back, it already looks bli ayin hara, like, right? Everybody had their time frame. Some of us are a little more sped up. But entropy tells us that things left on their own tend to get worse, not better. The Jews come back to a destroyed land because nobody cared. As soon as we come home, now they care. I want to take you to a few psukim later. Who cares and what do they want from the Jews now? So if you can open up to, look at Ezra, chapter 3. Let's first see how they build, and then who comes to bother us. So look at Pasuk Aleph, the first Pasuk. Vayiga HaChodesh HaShvi, and it's the 7th month. Uvnei Yisrael be'arim ve'yesfu ha'am, ki ish echad el Yerushalayim. They are so excited. 70 years later, there are still people who are alive. So it's not just a generation that didn't see the land of Israel, didn't see the Bet HaMikdash, didn't see the destruction. These are people who've been through it. Vayakam it's Yehoshua ben Yotzadak, ve'echav ha'kohanim, uZerubbabel ben Shaltiel ve'echav, vayivnu et mizbach Elohei Yisrael, ha'alot alav olot. They are so overjoyed. They start building a mizbeach, bringing korbanot. Vayachinu ha'mizbeach al mechonato, and they're coming to ruins, right? Nebuchadnezzar didn't leave it nice, and it got ruined. He destroyed it completely. They're starting to rebuild. If you look at Pasuk Dalet, ויעשו את חג הסוכות, כתוב, ועולת יום ביום במספר, כי משפט דבר יום ביומו. Finally, in 70 years, they're coming back home. They're renewing the Bet HaMikdash. They're celebrating Sukkot. They donate their money, their funds, their resources. If you look at Pasuk Chet, in the 2nd year of them coming back home, Zerubbabel now starts bringing the Levim. Okay, yalla, now that we're starting to clear off the structure, now it's time for the Kohanim, thank you, to start their practice again. The Levim to come back. The Jews are so happy. If the Jews are so happy, it means it's not going to be for too long. Look at Perek Dalet, so the 4th chapter, the first verse. וישמעו צרי יהודה ובנימין, כי בני הגולה בונים היכל לאדוני אלוהי ישראל. So, the people, the adversaries, those who bother Am Yisrael all the time, they're here. Guess who's back in town? They haven't been here for 70 years. The Jews are back home. And if the Jews are home, why don't we go make them trouble? So what do? Now, you have to understand, our Chachamim tell us that these are the Shomronim. Later on, by the story of Chanukah, we have a big confrontation with when Alexander Melech Mogdan, right, Alexander from Macedonia comes, and they have the showdown with Shimon HaTzadik. This is leading up to that huge battle between the Samaritans, the Shomronim, and the Jews. Primarily, the Shomronim was a group that were not indigenous to the land of Israel. Today we're very busy with indigenous. Yeah? They were not indigenous to the land of Israel. Who brought them there? Oh, very good. Sancheriv, the king of Ashur, Assyria, when he fought, he did an exchange program. Yes? Why? It's very simple. When they took over the empires, part of the trick of making people feel disoriented, disillusioned, was moving them from place to place. He had brought groups that had nothing to do with the land of Israel and put them smack in the land of Israel. In the Shomron, the Shomronim. One of the subgroups were the Kutim, who we know constantly harassed, hurt the Jewish people. So here they see a new opportunity. Look at Pasuk Bet. Vayigshu el Zerubbabel ve'el Rashi Havot. So they come to Zerubbabel and the head of the leaders. Vayomeru lahem nivnei imchem. Why don't we come build with you? This is a great project. Ki kachem nidrosh le'elohechem ve'lo anachnu zofchim mimei esa. Your God is our God. We're the true Jews. So if you're back in town, why don't you, let's be part of your project. Let's take initiative with you. Vayomer lahem Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel and Yehoshua say to them, Ushar Rashi Havot. So this is unanimous. It's not like one leader makes the decision, the other ones say no. Everybody says, Lo lachem velanu. This partnership, not a good idea. We're not going to build together. Why? Ki anachnu yachad. We with ourselves, nivne l'Adonai Elohei Yisrael, kasher tzivanu hamelech Koresh melech Paras. You know, we're here as emissaries from the King Cyrus. Koresh sent us on a very unique mission to build the temple for the Jewish people. He did not ask us to turn this into a volunteer service. Thank you for your offer. No thanks. What happens? The minute they hear this answer, so if they were actually coming to help, what would a normal response? You offer your help. What does somebody say? No thanks. What should your response be? Okay, I tried, right? I was trying to be helpful. No thanks. You see this, by the way, a lot. The test to see if somebody actually cares about you, it's all about them, is how they respond when you say no, right? If you say no thanks and the other person starts getting offended, and what do you mean? But I was so I thought it was about me. If it was about me and I said no, I expect you to honor that. If it wasn't about me, so don't be a liar. You have here a group of liars. They come under the premise, we want to help the Jewish people. The minute the leadership says no, they go back to Koresh. They go back to the empire and they say, the Jews, this is trouble. You think out of the goodwill of your heart, you're letting them rebuild. You want to praise the God of Israel. You don't know the Jews. The minute that they're going to build their Beit HaMikdash is the minute that they're going to start disregarding you. They're going to be disrespectful. Who do you think they're going to start paying taxes to? First, they're going to build a religious institution. Tomorrow, they're going to tell you they want their own autonomy. Soon, they're going to bring back their nationalism. And before you know it, you're going to be gone. So what happens? Let's look at Pasuk Tet. If you notice, similar to Sefer Daniel, this is where it switches over from Hebrew to Aramaic. So the Shomronim send letters. They're smart. They don't send it all the way to Koresh. You have to understand. It's not like you send an email today and it gets there tomorrow. We're sending letters that take months and years. So they send it to the project managers. And the project managers halt the project until we get confirmation from Koresh to see, does he want you to continue? Because clearly now we have a lot of complaints. They're being lodged against you. For those of you who ever tried to build. I remember one of my family members was trying to get permits to build something, and it took them 7 years just to get the permits from the city because this coding was incorrect and that coding was incorrect and this was wrong and this is what they wanted added. So they're very smart. The Shomronim go to the managers and say, you want to hold this project before you know anything else. And they do. They hold the project. It makes it back both to Koresh and then Daryavesh, who say, excuse me, we very explicitly told the Jewish people they should go home, they should build a Beit HaMikdash. You have no business getting in the way. And under Zerubbabel and Yehoshua Kohen Gadol, the Jews finish the Beit HaMikdash. So the structure is there. This is where we move into the story of Purim. Most of us think that Purim happens and there's no Beit HaMikdash. The tragedy is, as wonderful as the story of Purim is and how heroic the efforts of the leadership is and the miracles, you know what would have been better? If the story never happened. Because the story should have ended with Koresh proclaiming to the Jewish people who wants to go home, and everybody in the room should have unanimously waved their hand and said, me, pick me first, take me home, and that would have been the end of the story. You have to ask yourself, why in the world did the Jews stay in Persia? Why are they in Shushan? Why are they still in Bavel? Especially when the Beit HaMikdash was built. It's not like there's no Beit HaMikdash. How do you know that? I want to take you to the Megillah. Look at Megillat Esther. Look at chapter 5, verse 3. So it's Perek A in Megillat Esther, Pasuk Gimel.
For those in the Google Classroom, it's attached to the PDF.
It is? Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
What chapter?
Again, it's chapter 5, Pasuk Gimel. So if you look at the third verse, this is when Esther is going for the first time to Achashverosh to invite him to the party. Now she's trembling because she knows she hasn't been called to the king. And if you don't, it's not like today, a casual announcement. I knock on your door, hi, how are you? This is very official. If you weren't welcome and you come, you got killed. It's very simple. Esther comes, and it's obvious to Achashverosh that she didn't just come to say hi. Or you ever have that people call you? And, hi, how are you? What do you need from me? I always say that. Don't give me all the niceties. Just tell me what you want. You clearly want something. right? Sometimes you see this with little kids. Oh, Ima, you look so nice. Yeah, what do you need? What do you want? Right? Now, some people, so with little kids, it's cute. But with adults, I don't need you to flatter me. Just tell me what you want. So look at verse 3. Vayomer la hamelech. The king says to her, Malach Esther Amalka, Uma bakashatech. What do you want? Esther, why are you here? What do you want? What's your request? Ad chatzi hamalchut vinaten lach. I will give you up to half of my kingdom. Vatomer Esther, and Esther says, Im al hamelech tov, if it's okay with the king, yavo hamelech va'aman hayom, and she invites him to the party. Now I want to look with you for a second into Mesechet Megillah, Amud Tedvav, so 15, Daf. Okay, so it's Daf 15, Amud Bet. I'm reading to you. Vayomer la hamelech, and the king says to her, Esther, what do you want? I will give you up till half of my kingdom. So the Gemara says, Chatzi hamalchut. Why half? Achashverosh is offering her half, velo kol hamalchut, but he's not willing to give her the entire kingdom. Velo davar shechotzetz l'malchut, nor is he willing to give her anything that might split his kingdom into two. For example, umanihu. What is he referring to? Binyan Bet HaMikdash. He says, Esther, I am willing to give you everything, except if you're going to ask me for more for the Bet HaMikdash, the answer is going to be no. Seemingly at this point, the Bet HaMikdash was standing, but it was just a structure. It wasn't a fully functional structure, and we'll see soon why. Meaning, why wasn't it fully functional? Achashverosh says, I'm not willing to give it to you. Two reasons. So Rashi says something very interesting. Oh, very good. Why would he even mention this to her? Right? He doesn't know that she's Jewish. Ah, very good. So that's the Gemara. But, so here's one answer I liked, which is from both Rashi and the Marsha. They say, why, like Yoni, you just asked, why is he mentioning to the Esther? He doesn't, assuming he doesn't know she's Jewish, why is he talking about the Beit HaMikdash? If you look at the map we used last time, geographically, Yerushalayim is somewhat the center of his kingdomship. And he says to Esther, if for whatever reason you're going to ask me anything to do with the land of Israel, I know a little bit of I know history. And the history is, my ancestors had somebody, Daniel, tell them that the minute the Jews are going back home, my empire will just divide and disappear. So if there's any reason, doesn't matter you're Jewish, you're not Jewish, but if there's any reason you're asking me about Jerusalem and the temple, the answer is no, because I know that that's the key to the success of the Jews, but it's the demise of my kingdomship. So that's Rashi. The Maharal says something else. The Maharal says, Achashverosh knew that if the Jewish people go back home, he was already in his mind. Remember, the Shomronim and the subgroup, the Kutim, were busy sending letters. First to Koresh, Daryavesh, Achashverosh, telling him, you don't understand what you're doing to your empire. You're letting the Jews build, and they will be the reason that your empire fails. So in the back of his mind, he already knows this is a problem. The Jewish people going home, giving them autonomy, it's a problem. Esther, if your request has anything to do with, sometimes you have something on your mind and then somebody mentions something, and what's the connection? That's the connection. So you have Achashverosh, he says, I'm willing to give you, but not this. Esther, not this. Achashverosh dies. We know the story, right? So Haman dies, Achashverosh dies, Esther is still there. Esther doesn't seemingly come home. Right? And then we move on to the next king. So this is the next part of the story that I would like us to focus on. The next king after Achashverosh, you have your cheat sheet, is who?
Daryavesh the second.
Very nice. Daryavesh the second. Let's look at Ezra. So we're back in Ezra 7. Okay, Ezra chapter 7, Perek Zayin. Now, if the first half of Sefer Ezra is dedicated to the history of the first Aliyah, this is where the second group of exiles, of Jewish people, go back. Now, if you look into the Malbim on these psukim, he says something very interesting. He says, why is Ezra going to ask for permission again? If Koresh already gave permission, why is he going now for a second time? He says very simple. When Koresh said, who wants to go? It was a very particular voyage. Once that ended, you needed now a second mission to say, okay, the Jewish people, whoever went, wonderful. You went, you were on the first Aliyah. Now, immigration's closed. Nobody else is leaving. Oh, you want another wave of immigrants to leave? No problem. If you want to now emigrate, you want to go back, you're going to have to ask permission again. Again, you have an opportunity. So this is after the story of Purim. You would think at this point, those people who didn't get the memo the first time, that we should probably go home, for sure, after the Purim story, for sure. Meaning what's the Purim story? We almost died. We were almost completely wiped off the face of earth. You would think, given the opportunity, we should run, not go. Run home. Right? If you didn't get the lesson the first time, the second time for sure. So look at Perek Zayin, the 7th chapter, the 1st verse. V'achar hadvarim ha'ele b'malchut Artaxshast, or Artaxshast, this is a tongue twister for me. Artaxshast, or Artaxshasta, depending if there's a Shiva at the end or not. Melech Paras, so this is really Daryavesh. Okay, think like Paro, but that's not his name. So this is, again, title, put in king. Ezra comes and says, I want to go up. Please, can I lead a mission? I want to go up. Things didn't work out so well for us the last couple of years. Maybe you can let us go home. And Daryavesh says yes. Daryavesh says yes. If you look at Pasuk Zayin, let's do Vav. Hu Ezra ala mi Bavel, v'hu sofer mahir b'torat Moshe. So his claim to fame is not that he gets prophecy, but that he's a scribe. V'yitein lo hamelech ki Adonai Elohav alav kol bakashato. He comes to the king, and the king says, whatever you need to make this mission a success, please, I'm at your disposal, go. V'ya'alu mibnei Yisrael min ha'kohanim v'haleviim v'hameshorerim. So he goes up with some more of the Kohanim, the Leviim that specifically sang. And this all happens in the 7th year of Daryavesh's leadership. He comes there, and he's devastated. If you look at the whole chapter, 7, 8, aside for physically, the land of Israel is destroyed. So yes, the Beit HaMikdash is standing, but there's really no infrastructure as far as the city walls had been destroyed, the civilization. Right? Think about if you haven't mowed your grass for 1 month. At 70 years. The place is wild. There are weeds growing. There are people, not the kind that they sell today in California. The place is a mess. So the first Aliyah came. Very good. We're going to talk about them in a minute. They come and they see the state of the Jewish affairs is horrible too. The Jewish people that were there had intermingled and intermarried with the rest of the nations. The people were very poorly educated. People, you show them a Torah, they didn't know which direction to open it, let alone how to read it, and certainly not how to keep it. And Ezra comes and he realizes he needs to make sweeping change. Now, Ezra doesn't come on his own. You always hear the names Ezra, Nehemiah coming together. So I want to take you to Nehemiah a minute. If you look at Nehemiah, let's look at chapter 1. Now, like I mentioned to you, really, this book, Nehemiah, was not a book. It used to be Ezra 1 whole book, including this. Later in history, it gets divided into Ezra and Nehemiah. Hold that thought a minute. Let's look at Nehemiah. So the first chapter, the first verse. Here's a very interesting story. So we don't know so much about who is Nehemiah's family. We don't know so much. We do know what his job is and how he gets to the land of Israel. Let's look. Divrei Nehemiah ben Chachlai. So Nehemiah, the son of Chachlai, Vahi Chachaliah, thank you. Oy, Hashem Yishmo. Vahi b'chodesh Kislev, Shnat 20, V'ani hayiti b'Shushan habira. So this is now in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of the reign of Dariavish. He's in the city of Shushan. Why is he in the city of Shushan? Because that's where he lives. Vayavo Chanani, echad me'achai hu v'anashim Yehuda. So somebody, one of the Jews who had gone to the land of Israel and was living in Yerushalayim, it is storming outside. Right? Gishmei bracha. Sounds like hail. For San Diego, this is very, very rare. We have rain and we're getting hail. I hope we're not getting any of the other plagues. Yeah?
But if it's hailing, it deserves it. But once
Okay, 1 second. We have to go see the hail. Chevra. Yeah, I knew this was a bad idea to host you guys. We knew it from the onset. We should have said no thanks when you canceled on the first flight.
6,000 against everything. And when it rained in that summer, it's the old I got questions.
It's hailing? He's going down with them? Chevra, hang on, please. This is historic. It is hailing.
It's happening there.
Michael, you can use my umbrella. It's outside.
Rabbanit, I apologize.
No, you have to go see this.
I don't remember the answers from different
Safta, you have to go outside and see this hail.
I did. I thought it's a cookie, but
Want to pause the recording? You want to?
Well, Yitzhak is going to have a lot of fun cutting this out.
so please get off the range.
That's hilarious.
People don't forget once they had to go, I think it was New Jersey for work. I don't know. It was like raining.
San Diego. No, I want to tell Audrey. Thank you. But that's not.
All right, now all the people in California are going to come down because the people in New York are so unimpressed.
We are an embarrassment to civilization.
The sky, unless somebody throws ice cream out of an airplane. Okay, very exciting over here. Rabbanit, the floor is all yours.
Oh, Elchanan, just close the door. You can stay outside.
Come back inside, yes.
Yeah, this 60-degree white rain is very cold.
Very cold, right? Shh. Come.
Our sky's overflowing. This is the first time. I don't remember that. Wow.
We
This
lost
is like a
two spaces
typical day on the East Coast.
tonight.
I don't know. I'm losing brain cells at this point, honey.
Okay.
Okay, Chevra. What, ready? Nehemiah. Let's talk about Nehemiah. So, if you look into the Gemara in Sanhedrin 93b, I'm going to tell it to you. The Gemara says that originally, this was not a book on its own. Yeah. Rather, it was part of Ezra. But most of what's written in these books was actually written by Nehemiah. So the Gemara asks, so then why wasn't he given, today already we have a book on his name, but why wasn't he given the honors? And the Gemara has some harsh words. The Gemara says, because unlike David HaMelech, who also talks about himself, David talks about himself with a lot of humility. And Nehemiah comes with a lot more, and not attitude. You have to understand, he's coming to the Jewish people, and we're going to see the revolution he creates. So it's not like he doesn't have reason to be proud. But the Chachamim felt that he came with a little too much pride. And that's why Hashem says, no, the book is going to be called Ezra. Doesn't matter that you wrote most of it, it's going to be called Ezra. It seems like later on, though, in history, it ended up getting the title Nehemiah. So here is a very interesting exchange you have in the streets of Shushan. Jews from the land of Israel come, and they're walking around. Now, it's not like, unfortunately, I have to give ourselves a little bit of musar. Why do I say a little musar? because I didn't grow up in San Diego. I grew up in New York, where every single day there are a lot of Jews from Israel that come. They come knocking on your doors. And it's musar on both ends. What do I mean? After a while, the attitude of the Jews towards those from Israel, who's coming? The dregs of society. Lock the doors, make sure then, pretend nobody's home, the lights are off. And it's not right on our end, because we know that the Yaldei Yerushalayim, the children of Jerusalem, there's something very holy. Avira de'eretz Yisrael machkim. It says even just the air of Israel makes you smarter and wiser and holier. That attitude of zilzul towards Jews from Israel is incorrect. The flip side is, as Jews, and I could say as a Jew from Israel, we're all Jews from Israel, we also have to lift our name. We can't come as the paupers and the beggars and then expect otherwise. Side note. So Nehemiah sees a group of these Jews, and he goes over to one of them. Vayavo Chanani echad me'achai, hu v'anashim Yuda, v'eshalem al ha'Yehudim ha'pleitam. Again, in Nehemiah, pasuk bet now gimel. He asks them about the Jews that had come up, those who had been there with the first, with Zerubbabel, those who had gone up with Ezra. Vayomeruli, and they say to me, those who had stayed, hanisharim asher nisharu min hashvi. It says hashvi in my chumash. In my you have it different? No, mine says, yeah, okay. Min hashvi sham bamdina b'ra'a gdola u'b'cherpa. He says, tell me how the Jews are living there. And they respond with tremendous chilpa, tremendous disgrace. Why? V'chomat Yerushalayim meforatzat u'sha'area nitztu ba'esh. The Jews report the Jews are living in terrible disgrace. It's terrible shame. Why? Because the city walls are still not built. The place is still burned down.
Who's speaking bad about Jews?
So Nehemiah is in the streets of Shushan. There are Jews from Israel coming back, giving a report. And Nehemiah says, tell me what's going on in the land of Israel. We know that Zerubbabel went with his first mission. We know Ezra went up there. Tell us what's going on. And the Jews report that, yes, there's a Beit HaMikdash standing, but the place still has tremendous shame. Why? Though we have a religious edifice there, the nation has not yet built itself up. We still don't have an autonomous government. And as long as the Jewish people don't have their own autonomy, it doesn't matter how many religious artifacts we own. It brings shame onto the Jewish people. When we aren't able to defend ourselves and we need our allies to pay us out, that's shameful for the Jewish people. When the Jewish nation can't stand up and make their own decisions because they're worried about, well, what's this country going to say, and what's if they cut funds from that country, and how are we going to survive? That is the biggest chilul Hashem that could happen to the Jewish nation. So sure, do we have a kotel? We have more than a kotel. Do we have religious places now? Yes. But Nehemiah hears the report, and he's distraught. How could it be that the Jewish people, 70 plus years later, are still living in this embarrassment of the Jew in exile, even in the land of Israel? So what does he do? He says to himself, you look at Pasuk Hey, Va'omar, Ana Adonai el HaShamayim. He starts praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, how could it be? You're the one who shomer haberit v'chesed lo avav u'leshomrei mitzvotav. You're the one who keeps your promises. How could it be that you haven't fulfilled the promise? I'm begging you, I'm praying to you, Hashem, restore the glory to the Jewish people. And then he goes on, he says, it must be our fault. It's the Jewish people's fault that the shame of the Jewish people and of HaKadosh Baruch Hu still hasn't been done away. He says it can't be. It can't be that we came home. It can't be that we're in the land of Israel, and yet the Jewish people are living like Jews who live in exile. And he makes a decision. He prays to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a beautiful prayer. And then he makes a decision. And let's look at, if you can, look at chapter Bet. Nehemiah Bet. He makes a decision. He's not just going to pray and cry, because it's very nice to cry and cry and cry, but any crying and remorse without action doesn't count for anything. Just because you felt bad about something, but you didn't actually do anything, doesn't count for anything. Nehemiah makes a decision that not only is he going to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that things should be better, he's going to change things. And if you look at chapter 2, Vayi b'chodesh Nisan, so now it's in Chodesh Nisan, Shnat Esrim, so it's in the 20th year of Dariavesh's reign. Hamelech yayin lefanav, the kings like to drink a lot. Remember all the parties? They have a lot of drinking. Vayesa et hayayin, vayetena lamelech. So here you have to understand, Nehemiah has a job. What is his job? He is the cupbearer. What is the cupbearer? Very good. He's the one who serves the king his wines, right? He's the one who's bringing. Now, to us it might sound like a silly job, but really it's only the people who are very trustworthy. Why? Because if you remember what Bigtan and Teresh wanted to do, right? The one who's bringing the wine to the king has status. He's coming to the king, and the king has a complaint. He says, nothing about my demeanor had changed. Yes, in his heart, he's broken. He just had a conversation with the Jews who were living in Israel, and he's shattered. But he doesn't do anything different. At least he thinks. The king looks at him, and the king says to me, Madua panecha ra'im? Why does your face look so bad today? V'ata enecha chole, you're not sick. En ze ki mura lev, va'ira harbe mod. The king says, you're not sick today, so that wouldn't explain why you look so terrible. It must be you have malice in your heart. And the minute Nehemiah hears that, he is terrified. Because if the king is reading his face and he's saying, I know you're not sick, and you look like there's something wrong with you, and it must mean it has something to do with me, the next step probably is wherever Haman was. And Nehemiah is overcome with tremendous fear. So he looks at the king, Va'omar lamelech, and he says to the king, Hamelech lo'olam yichyeh, madua lo yira panai asher ha'ir bet. He says, I promise you, king, this is not about you. I have to be honest, though. You know, the city where my grandparents are buried, it's a chareva. It's a destroyed, horrible ruins. U'sha'area u'klu ba'esh. And all its gates, its entranceway, the whole place was burned down, and it looks so disgraceful. I can't. I'm bearing my heart to you and telling you, king, it has nothing to do with you. Simply what's sitting in my heart is the profound sadness of the state of affairs of my nation. Vayomer li hamelech, so the king says to him, Al ma ze ata mevakesh, what are you asking? Similar to what Achashverosh asks Esther, Ma bakashatech v'naten lach, what do you want? Right, so Dariavesh says, what do you want? So Nehemiah tells the king, Im al hamelech tov, again, similar words. In fact, the phrases are so similar, they're almost copy-paste. Esther also says, Im hamelech tov, come with me to a meal with Haman. V'im yitav avdecha lefanecha, asher tishlacheni el Yehuda, el ha'ir kivrot avotai, ve'evnena. It says, if it's okay with you, send me back home. I don't want to be here. It doesn't matter how wonderful life is. It doesn't matter how much you feed me and you clothe me and you give me riches and I have a stable job. The minute I hear about what's really happening in my homeland, I just want to go home. And I think many of us, that hits home a lot. Because after October 7th, the feeling was just, the normal feeling should have been, keep me very far away from there. I don't want to, but the normal reaction that the Jewish nation had was there weren't enough flights going back home. You couldn't get enough plane tickets, even if you wanted, just take me home. I want to be with my people. So the king, Vayomer li hamelech, and here's a very interesting word. V'hashegal yoshevet etzlo. Hold it. Ad matayeh. Okay, so how long do you want to go? Now, if you look at the commentaries, they're divided on who's sitting near the king. So some say it was a dog, right? He had a beautiful little puppy. Forgive me. Some say it was, forgive me for the next comparison. Some say no, it was his concubine. This was not quite his wife. I believe it's the Malbim, though. Don't quote me on the Malbim, but for sure one of the commentaries. I think it was the Malbim. He said, no, it's the Malbim. It's the Malbim. Why? Because he only has one word. When he says what is the definition of this word? Esther. Esther? What does that mean? We know that Esther, though the Jewish people are celebrating Purim, she stays, for all intents purposes, she stays in the king's palace. She stays with Achashverosh. And now her son is the king. Now, if you'll remember, just like the story of Belshazzar, when he's going crazy, the Malka, the queen comes. We said the queen was not his wife. The queen was his mother who comes to calm him down. Similarly, the Malbim says this is Esther, who turns to the king Daryavesh, and her mission is finally complete. So if she started the mission of saving the Jewish people from destruction and then getting them ultimately not quite to the homeland, here she looks at her son Daryavesh and says, you're one of us. You're one of them. Let me finish the job I started. Sure, I saved the Jewish people from annihilation, but the Jewish people need to thrive. And the only way the Jewish people are going to thrive is if you let them go back home. If you let them secure their borders, if you let them build an army, if you let them have a government that's functional, you will have not just accomplished your mission as the king, you're going to let me finish mine. Which then makes sense to how the king reacts, because the king should really say, are you crazy? You want to go home? I hear rebellion. That's all I hear. I hear revolution, right? I hear the bells of freedom in my ears. That's what I hear, right? I hear July 4th. But Esther says, no, the Jewish people have to go home. In fact, you're one of them. You should understand. So Daryavesh turns to Nehemiah. He says, fine, how long do you want to go for? Nehemiah says, I want to go for as long as as long as they're going to need me. He ends up going for 12 years before he comes back to Shushan. And Nehemiah and Ezra are both attributed in not just taking Yerushalayim and rebuilding it, but rebuilding in a way that is functional, creating a society where there's a hierarchy, there's a government, the Torah is being retaught to the Jewish people, the laws are being followed, the economy starts flourishing, the government starts being built up. And this really transforms a building into a functional nation again. So ask me a question. Oh, okay. So you had a question, Yoni.
Esther stayed against her will.
Okay. Seeming so. Meaning, it doesn't seem like she went to begin with willingly. Yeah.
But this is the ultimate sacrifice of Esther.
Correct.
She essentially sacrificed herself for her name.
This, very good. Not only it's you find, that's why she says, "V'kasher avadati." You find that Esther goes from, and Yoni, you could almost say she goes from being victim to taking hold of her own destiny, where when she makes that statement of, yeah, maybe I was brought to the palace against my will, just like all the other thousands of girls. Yes? It's not unique to Esther. At a certain point, though, she makes the decision to take her destiny into her own hands. And she says, it's true, if I will have to make a personal sacrifice, and that's a great conversation for another day of, are we allowed to sacrifice the individual for the greater good, right? You have this, unfortunately, in Europe, much of Tach v'Tat, right? The years of Chmelnytsky and Machshemo and his wonderful Cossacks, where the city, they would say, give us the rabbi of the city or give us the popular people and we'll leave the city alone, right? Whether it's the Cossacks, the Crusaders, the Jews didn't have a good time in much of the world, but Europe was no party at all. In fact, I always marvel how not only did the Jews in Europe survive, but they thrived. The fact that there are books that were written in countries like Poland and Russia and Ukraine, I mean, we were being massacred and killed all the time. The fact, when I was in Kiev, and I saw a statue of Chmelnytsky in Machshemo, and may his name be obliterated, I couldn't believe it. Because in Kiev, in Ukraine, right, the capital of Ukraine, he's a war hero. Right? He's a war hero who came to emancipate them. Yeah, sure, he came to emancipate them on the death of thousands, if not maybe millions of human beings, specifically Jews, right? So that's a great question. But you find that Esther HaMalka does make that ultimate decision of not just staying with Achashverosh, but really staying entrenched in the royalty of Persia, where, from what it seems, Daryavesh, as much as he's kind to the Jewish people, doesn't affiliate himself with the Jewish people.
Raised him and she sacrificed her whole life for Judaism. Why didn't she raise him like you're a Jew? And
Because there's another 50%. In the end of the day, he's growing up as Achashverosh is dead. Now, you had something you want.
Talks about how Esther was unique. That though she was with another man that was not her husband, she was able to return to Mordechai.
Okay, so that's right. The Kabbalists like to go down the route where I'm not Gemara.
The Gemara is very clear that Esther was allowed to return back to Mordechai even after the situation with
Achashverosh.
Now, that being the case, would that mean that she really went back at the end of the story? It's a happily ever after story? Or is that more just that in those times she was going in between the house of the king and the house of Mordechai?
Right. I don't know. I was listening to a shiur. I am not a Kabbalist, I can tell you that much. Yes. But he was quoting from the Zohar that states that when Esther was with Achashverosh, she had the ability to, she wasn't actually there. It was a shed, like a demon she sent in her own place. Again, I know nothing about demons and shedim, and I,
version of that is the Talmud Sanhedrin when she was with
Achashverosh.
she was lifeless.
Oh, very good.
The Zohar uses that she replaced herself with another being.
Very good. So I was going to quote, so if you go back to that Gemara, you can understand, I'm not telling you this is what happened, but unfortunately, we see this a lot with trauma victims where there is a depersonalization that does happen, where the person's body could be present, but they're able to disassociate so well so that sometimes they can't even recount what happened because they weren't there. Sure, their body was there, lo aleinu. But I have a question. We had seemingly 3, 4, numerous opportunities for the Jewish people as a whole to go home. And it's not like being where we were was good, right? It's not like being in Galut was a piece of cake. We weren't having a party. Yeah, we did have a party, but after the party, we paid so heavily, we almost all died, right? And yet you don't find that all the Jewish people go home. In fact, after the destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash, the Jewish people never completely go home. Most of them don't. We know who goes home. The poor, the weak, the sick, the ones rejected. Basically, anybody that has a reason not to go doesn't go. The people have nothing to lose. Of course, they end up going. That phenomenon haunts us. It haunts us even up until today. I remember when I was once in a Shiva house in New York, and my family had just made Aliyah. We just moved when I was 19. Yeah, pause a minute. My whole life, my parents have been telling me since the day I'm born that we're going to move to Israel. So since I'm probably Avinoam's age, in 3rd grade, I would come to school and I would tell my teachers, I don't have to really do homework and I certainly don't have to do the summer packets because next year we're moving to Israel. Now this went on till I graduated high school. So every single year, the embarrassment of day one coming back, and they would say, Devorah, you said you're moving. I said, I know, because my parents said we're moving. Every single year, they said we're moving. Now, they weren't lying to me. My parents were investing in a house. They built a house. For whatever other reasons, it didn't happen. It only happened when I was 19. My parents, who then consulted with the rabbi said, ask the kids that are home. And we said, of course. I mean, for the last 20 years, for the last 19 years, we've been moving. That's when my family actually moved. And I remember coming back to New York and I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. She said, well, how's Israel? How's the move? I said, all moves are hard. All beginnings are hard. When are you guys joining us? And suddenly the Shiva house of like 30 people fell silent. And I looked and I said, did I just say something wrong? And they said, Devorah, come on. Who's moving? I said, you come on. We're all moving. She said, no, when Mashiach comes. Okay, I said, but what if it's not going to happen that way? She said, okay, so we won't move. And I still, when I think about it, it makes me distraught. It really does. How could it be that you're part of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, and you call yourself religious, even very, very religious, and the basic tenets of our religion you don't have? Because the Jewish people and the land of Israel are one. You cannot separate the two from each other. Look at us. 2,000 years of Galut has not done us well. 2,000 years not being home has done us really poorly. But any opportunity given, the Jews who had their heads on straight went home, right? That was the first thing. We didn't need movements and we didn't need convincing and we didn't need reparations and we didn't need anything. Pack your bags and come home. Right? I have grandparents who are buried in the cemetery in Tzvat because they made Aliyah in the 1800s. Why? Because the minute they were allowed to leave Hungary, they left. They just went home. That's what happened. They didn't need a movement to tell them to come home. They just came home. And it's hard because today, we're in a war. And there are different sentiments and different things that go around. And I don't think we have to convince the rest of the world what they have to believe. They're going to believe what they believe anyway. They're going to think what they want to think anyway. I've never seen anybody change their mind because of a TikTok video that they saw, nor even a UN conference. I'm talking to us as the Jewish people. We have to do our own reckoning and say, where are our values? Where are our convictions? How could it be that we're living here? And you could say, yeah, it's very nice. You're living here in San Diego. It's true. But there's not a day that goes by that I ask myself, when are we going home? When are we going home? Because we don't want to be like the people that I want to read to you about. If you look into, let me see if I can pull it up. I have a few minutes. So there's a very interesting book called Seder Hayom, written in the 16th century. So think of the 1500s. Go to Tzvat. Tell me who's in that scene. Oh, very good. So you have Rabbi Yosef Cairo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Who else? Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the Ari HaKadosh. Who else? Rabbi Shlomo Halevy, the author of. Oh, very good. We got Cordovero here, the Sefer Talmud Devorah. Rabbi Shlomo Kabetz, the author of Lichadodi. Or Askari, sometimes they say. Incorrectly? Oh. Oh, so we're talking about a generation of giants. And you have over here somebody the name of Reb Yafeh Mod. We have Rabbi Moshe ben Mechir. He's both a halachist and a Kabbalist. How you put the two together? You can. Yeah, you can. When you're bigger than the little pettiness somehow. So he wrote the book Seder Hayom, which really walks you through the day of from when you wake up till you go to sleep, the tefillah, the different things that people do. Right before the Shemona Esrei, he has a very interesting. Oh, Yafeh, I did not know that. He is the author of Modani. Yafeh Mod.
I mean, it's a source. I don't know if
Wow.
you wrote it, but it's the first source we have. It's not so long the Jews have been saying Modani.
So I want to read to you. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. Otherwise, I'll tell it to you. I think I have. Here. Oh. Okay. He says something very charif, something very sharp. He says, he's talking about after you finish saying Shema, there's Emet, V'yatziv, V'nachon, V'kayam, right? Before the Shemona Esrei. He says, V'shamati, B'zah HaShevach shel Emet V'yatziv. He says, and I heard that this prayer, Emet, V'yatziv, V'nachon, V'kayam, V'yashar, this little short tefillah, who composed it? He says, Shalchu, B'nei HaGola shayu rechokim Yerushalayim, V'lo hayu im Ezra b'Bavel, v'shalach Ezra. So he says, I heard that this prayer was composed by those exiles who, when Ezra went up, they said, we don't want to come. We're sorry. Why don't we want to come? They said, v'lo ratzu la'alod, b'amram, they said to him, shekevan shayu atidin ligalot, pam acheret, ubet hamikdash atid licharev, lama lanu lachpil yigonenu. They said, Ezra, we would love to come, but between you and I, we know that this Bet HaMikdash is going to be destroyed again. And we can't bear the heartache. We're going to come, we're going to move, we're going to settle. For what? Only to be thrown out again? We can't do this. Ezra, we love you. We're going to send you all the money you need. We're not coming. But don't judge us. We don't want you to judge us. And because we don't want us to be judged, we're going to compose a prayer that's going to reaffirm our conviction to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the land of Israel, to the Jewish people. We believe, we believe, we believe. But when it comes to the action, we just can't do it. Our hearts are just too weak. And you read this text, and you think to yourself, Hashem Yishmo. Here's a group of Jews who can verbalize to us that we know the right thing is to go back home. But we also know that there's going to be heartbreak. It's going to hurt us. The relocation is not easy. I promise you, if you ever bumped into bureaucracy in Israel, I remember when we first moved, I went to the Misrad HaPnim, the interior ministry where you get all your documents done. I remember after 6 months, I told the guard, if I know your first name and which coffee you drink, it's a problem. I shouldn't be coming to this office so many times, right? It's hard. It's not easy. The conveniences that you have, the 3 cars in your garage and the swimming pool in your backyard and the pleasant person who greets you in every store, you don't necessarily have that. And the Jewish people said, Ezra, we're just too weak. But don't judge us. I don't know. And I'm saying, yeah, we do have to judge ourselves. We do have to judge ourselves. Because even if we're going to sit here, at the very least, let's be honest about it. Let's not rationalize. And to be fair, some of us do need to be here. Everything does have a time and place. But it cannot be that at the very least, the end goal has to be there. Even if you never make it. But it cannot be that in your conscience, you could say, yes, I'm a Jew. Yes, I know that there's a land of Israel. Yes, I know that the Jewish people should go home. We should build our nation and create our own autonomy. But it's just not made for me. I'm willing to send a check. My check, I believe it was Menachem Begin, or Ben Gurion, who when he came to the United States, maybe it was Ben Gurion. People are throwing all his money at him. Right? Take the money. He said, I don't need your money. I need you. I need your people. I once heard a good quote. It said, some people, they're so poor, the only thing they have is money. Right? It's very nice to... Yeah, thank you. Nachon, Ben Gurion. Some people, it's not their fault. I want to read to you, maybe we'll end off with this from Echa Rabbah. Maybe it's not our fault. Maybe we could judge the Jewish people well. I don't know. I want to read to you. You tell me. So I'm going to open up Echa Rabbah. I want to read to you. I know for myself, after October 7th, at first there was obviously the shock and all the feelings, but then there was this sense of, maybe this is it, right? Maybe this is when the Jewish people were going to get together and we're going to fight until the end, and we're going to restore the glory to Am Yisrael and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, that when the Jewish people are weak, it's the greatest Chilul Hashem. You see this when Nehemiah says that there's Cherpa in Yerushalayim, that there's disgrace, is not related to the religious concept, is directly related to the nation, the government, the economy, the infrastructure. The embarrassment of the Jewish people is that we're a nation that's supposed to light up the whole world, and we don't even have a model to show for ourselves. We have a bunch of broken artifacts. So I thought maybe this is there was so much hope in my heart. And as the months went on, I believe it's George Orwell in the book Animal Farm, one of my favorite books. One of the last scenes is where the pigs who led the revolution against the humans are then seen having a toast with the humans who they're going to sell their animals to. And over there you get the coinage of the term power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that's what we see. As the months and days and months have been playing out, the hope has been replaced with a tremendous despair of where's our leadership? We have such good people. We have the best soldiers in the world. Every time I see a face of a soldier, the most beautiful, and I'm not just talking about it externally. And it can bring a certain amount of yush, of depression, of what's going to happen here. Because if the leadership is failing us and how is this ever going to end? I want to tell you that part of the nechama, a little bit of the maybe solace we could get is nothing's new. En davar chadash tachat hashemesh. Shlomo HaMelech said it already. There's nothing new. This conversation already takes place right after the Churban. And I want to read to you from Echa Rabbah. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. This is one of the verses in Echa. Yes? So we say, Hashivenu Adonai elecha. Hashem, please bring us back home. You initiate the process, v'nashuva. We're going to come home. Amira Knesset Yisrael lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Jewish people say, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world. Shelcha hu hashivenu. It's your job. You're the father. You're the one who's going to have to initiate. Amar lahem, and Hashem responds, no, shelachem hu. You're the ones who have to start the process. Shenemar, like it says in the Navi Malachi, Shuva elai v'ashuva. Hashem says, no, I already told the prophet, you are going to have to initiate. You're not going to be sitting there saying, Hashem help, I'm going to pray for 40 days and I'm going to go. No, get your act together. I promise you, the minute you say, I want, I will be there to make it happen to you. Lakach ne'emar, that's why it says, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, chadesh yamenu kikedem. Yirmiyahu Hanavi says, no. Renew the teshuvah like you did in the beginning. Remember when Adam HaRishon sinned? Hashem, he didn't initiate the process of teshuvah. You did. You came to him. You said, Ayeka, where are you? What's going on? You didn't wait for him to have a conversation. Because if you would have waited, we'd still be waiting at the gates of Eden. Hashem, you're the one who started the conversation. And the Gemara, the Echad Rabbah goes through a couple of different places where you find that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who initiates. And the Jewish people say, we can't. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're throwing it on us. But time and time again has proven that there are some of us who really do. And there's some of us who really don't. And if it's going to be up to us, it seems quite bleak. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to be the big one here. In fact, for those of you familiar, there are two beautiful piyutim that we sing very often on Shabbat. So one of them composed by Rabbi Yisrael Najara. Ya'ala, Ya'ala. Ya'ala. Boi legani. A beautiful song that depicts just this dance where the Jewish people are saying, Hashem, we want to come home. We want to be beautiful. Just start the process. You take the first step. And Hashem says, no, but I told you, you have to initiate. And this dance has been happening for centuries. It's not new. What we're experiencing today, so who's going to help? How's it going to happen? Is it going to be the Jewish people? Is it going to be a miracle? You find another song written by Rabbi Shlomo Ibn Gavirol or Gabirol, Shalom Leven Dodi, right? Shalom Leven. Very, very similar. Again, where you have a lover saying, bring us home. We want to be close. Go to the Mishorer, right? Shir HaShirim. Same dance, back and forth of, I want you, I need you, but I don't want to be the one to start. I don't want to be... And a part of me feels, and these are raw thoughts because the war isn't over. Not even close. So I'm sharing with you something in my heart and not something that's necessarily solid. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there'll be a Zerubbabel. Maybe there'll be a Ezra. Maybe there'll be a Nehemiah. Maybe you and I are going to be that. But there's also the other side, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think that as a Jewish people, we have to focus on both, which is we have to demand better. We do have to demand more. The Pirkei Avot, I just quoted it to somebody. She was just elected as one of the council members of a district here. And she shared with me, it's hard. It's hard because, whenever you get involved in politics, so you suddenly realize, you're trying to stop the Hoover Dam, but all you have is a teaspoon, right? So I shared with her from Pirkei Avot, where HaChachamim say, Lo alecha hamelacha ligmor. This feeling of, wow, there's so much work, I'm never going to be able to finish it, don't worry. That's the Yetzer Hara telling you, there's so much to do, don't do anything. But our Chachamim tell us, but you don't have the right to say, you know what, there's so much to do, I can't do it, I'm not doing anything. There's a balance. We have to look at the Jewish people and say, we have to demand more, internally. So I'm talking about an internal dialogue, not for the rest of the world to hear. We have to be able to criticize from the beginning to the end, the things that up until now have been going right, and the things that have been going wrong. Because if we don't have the ability to critique, we will not have the ability to fix. And when I say we, I mean every one of us. It's easy to point fingers, and my father-in-law says this all the time. He says, if you were the Rosh Memshala, if you were the leader of the nation, everybody has good ideas for him, right? It's true, everybody has good ideas. Now, it doesn't mean that those good ideas are bad. It simply means we also have to take responsibility. Nobody appointed Ezra and Nehemiah. They became Ezra and Nehemiah because they chose to be. So on the one hand, our hands are not tied. We're not victims. Jabotinsky, when he was trying to rally everybody to work, to get involved in the building of the nation, so he said, Yidden, learn to schießen, which in Yiddish means Jews. Learn how to shoot. Now, I'm not promoting violence, God forbid. That's not what I'm saying. Simply, the model of the weak Jew, the model of the Jew who just sits and cries and prays and waits for some kind of fantasy miracle, that Jew is over. I'm not telling you to stop praying. Chas v'shalom. Of course we have to pray. You see that Ezra, Nehemiah, before they go, of course they pray. But our job is to do. But, and this we have to put it back on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Part of our job is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are willing to do whatever it takes to bring success, not just to Am Yisrael, because this is not a selfish redemption. We are not looking for peace in the land of Israel simply because we care about Jews. It only starts in Israel. There's an entire world waiting to see, will good triumph? And I think the second half, we have to push back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to push back and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we've initiated enough. We have lost enough. We have, look at the videos of our soldiers. We've done our part. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's now your turn. It is now your turn to step back in. We're in the month of Purim. We're heading into the months of Nisan. It says, Nisan atidin higa'en. I very much believe that whereas we are willing to take on our role, we have to turn and demand from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you take your job. Not just for the Jewish people, but for the entire world. There needs to be a world that Memshelet Zadon is just gone from the world. That people could live in peace, in harmony. That people could, like the Navi said, one day we're going to be able to put our plows down. One day we're not going to know what to do with all those guns and machinery that we have because we'll have no need for it. And I'm praying that we should be from the Jews who learn the lessons and don't write the supplications. Sure, Emed v'yatziv v'nachon, beautiful tefillah. I'm asking you at this point, like Moshe Rabbeinu is told. The Jews are standing at the Sof, right, by the Yam Suf, and Hashem says, what are you coming to pray? Daber la'am v'yisau. Speak to the nation and go. And I'm looking at us and saying, Bezrat Hashem, we should continue doing our part. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kikedem. Hashem should bring us all back home, Bezrat Hashem, into a full redemption. On that note, I want to thank you all for learning together with me.